Welcome to TORAH Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 3 of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, straight from the Holy Land. Tonight's hot topic is going to be a hot one. For sure. Rabbi, welcome again to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. You have to tune in. You don't have a choice. Hopefully,
the way it goes.
Hopefully, everybody else will tune in as well. So tonight's hot topic is going to be, what was the hot topic? And it had to do with the. I actually had it written down. Where'd it go? Oh my gosh, we're going to it's.
Polygamy.
Thank you. It slips my mind. Wow. Yeah, polygamy and adultery. That's the hot topic. Okay, polygamy is kind of interesting. I've been hearing, Rabbi, over the years. I've been hearing, different people's opinions. You have shows even here in America where they have like My 12 Wives or something. I don't know. I forget the name of the show. My wife has seen it a few times. And
didn't they have a TV show, My 3 Sons, right? So you got My 5 Wives,
Yes, and exactly. But it seems to be, just something people are curious about. I mean, it's a TV show that actually had some pretty heavy reviews and ratings, and people are not really so much concerned as they are curious. Now, in biblical times, you've seen. King Solomon, kind of begs the question how wise he really was. But he had 300 wives, 600 concubines. And then, but then you have in the Torah it says that like a king, for example, should not take too many wives for himself or too many horses, etc., etc. But of course, the rule for common man isn't the same as the rule for kings. So, I'd like to just talk about how polygamy played a heavy role in the Tanakh. And also, what does that mean for today, not just for the Jew, but also for the Noahide? Where does the United States laws throw a counterbalance in with Hashem's allowances, if you will? So we'll kind of cover it from a bunch of different areas, different angles, if you're okay with that.
No problem. So we'll start from the beginning. You look in the Torah itself, there are a number of cases, especially from the beginning, where you do have where polygamy seemingly is permitted. You certainly see by Abraham. Abraham marries Hagar, however you want to call her, Hagar, because Sarah couldn't have children, so he marries her. You have the case of Yaakov marries Leah and Rachel, which, interesting enough, when he comes into the land of Israel, Rachel dies. So you definitely see that. Even though the patriarchs, this is a loaded question also, but even though the patriarchs, they held by the entire Torah before it was given, and they held to a higher standard. Once Yaakov entered the land of Israel, Rachel dies. So
before they entered, right?
Yeah. So the idea that we see is that it was permitted. But they held to a higher standard. So the whole question, we'll just take Yaakov for a second, that even by Yaakov, we understand that, when he marries Rachel, who comes out, it's really Leah. So we understand that, he's really supposed to be married to Leah, and that's where the 12 tribes are supposed to come from, from Leah, from Rachel, etc. So you see, if there's a purpose, or there's a higher purpose than marriage between a man and more than one wife, is certainly going to be permissible. But throughout the generations, that it was only by certain cases. You see, by kings, they're always supposed to have, as you mentioned, a certain number of wives, etc. But to the general populace, it wasn't, it certainly wasn't in vogue, at all. That, under certain circumstances, we see in history that it was permitted, but otherwise it wasn't. And then, we can take it from there. There was a ban, actually. There was a ban by Rabbeinu Gershom, who made this ban, and the ban stopped hundreds of years ago, but it pretty much came out that it was forbidden for anybody to marry more than one wife. And there's probably a number of reasons why, that was. One is, if you had more than one wife, certainly, a lot of infighting. That certainly, certainly could be. Also, that there was a certain amount of wives that a person should marry. Financially, wasn't so practical.
Good point.
Wasn't so practical. Not only that, but why is there an obligation only to marry, let's say, 4 wives? Because there's an obligation is written in the marriage document, which probably not a lot of people, know this, at least, certainly for Jews, and that is that in the marriage document, a husband has to provide for his wife, and he has to provide also to satisfy her, right? Even physically. So that being the case, if he had 4 wives, it'd be a little bit difficult, to be able to do that. Not to mention, you might kill the man in the process, by doing such a thing. But 4 wives, different times of the month, is going to be, extremely, extremely difficult. There was another issue, I think also, and that would have been that if a person married, a number of wives, let's say not in the same city. Obviously, the same city is kind of, I don't know how, who are we going to invite? Who are we going to invite for, for dinner? Who's going to come for, we're going to make a party. Like, all right, who's coming? But if they lived in different locations, so that could also lead to forbidden relationships between offspring. So there could have been a number of, different issues, why that ban was put out there, etc. But the main thing is that it wasn't, it certainly wasn't, it wasn't accepted by everybody. Interesting enough, by the Sephardim and by the Yemenites for sure, they didn't accept it up until probably 100 years ago. Yemenites had more than one wife as well, but on a practical level, it's a difficult thing as well. It's just, if you go back in history, you look at Adam and Eve, and God says when He brings woman to man, right? He says that a man should cleave to his wife. So you look at the 10 Commandments. The last of 10 Commandments of don't covet, right? You're not allowed to covet. You're not allowed to covet, your friend's wife. Right, so that seemingly would be against, marrying more than one person. But, you take it one step further. If you go to book of Leviticus, that talks about in Parsha Zacharemos, which speaks about forbidden relationships, which we read, funny enough, I mean, not so funny, but we read it by the afternoon service on Yom Kippur, of who you're allowed to marry, who you're not allowed to, who you're allowed to be with or not, forbidden relationships, right? That's the topic for now. So it is interesting that on the holiest day of the year, and your stomach's growling, you're starving, you've been in synagogue all day, and then the person reading the Torah is like belting it out. Don't be with this one, don't be with that one. And you're sitting there like, wow, like this is pretty intense. Right. You're working on tshuva, repentance, and it's like, but don't forget what your responsibility is in this world. Who you're allowed to be with. And you're like, really? Yom Kippur? This is what I should really be, thinking about. I'm thinking about a sandwich. I'm thinking about, all kinds of other things. What I'm missing on the day. Obviously, that shouldn't be, on the top of your mind. But, that's being belted out, as part of the, as part of the afternoon service, which is, which is interesting. So according to the Torah, it seems clear you should really be married to one person. Also, I mean, if you want to get, deep and mystical, according to Kabbalah, that when a person gets married, before he gets married, he only has half a soul. And when he connects to that person he's supposed, that he marries, hopefully marries the right person, then that soul becomes whole. Mm-hmm. Right? So, imagine if you have 5 of them together, the soul explodes. Like, you get one from here, one from there. I don't know how that works exactly, Kabbalistically, but if you look, according to that, you should only be married to one person. That seems to be clear. But if you look throughout the Talmud, throughout Medrash, which certainly comes before the ban of Rabbeinu Gershom, you don't see don't see really any cases at all saying, this rabbi was married to 4 different people, 5 different people, 10 different people. You don't see, any cases just about at all.
Right.
So if that's the way the Torah was supposed to be set up, and that's what God really wanted, then, throughout history, there should have been a lot of cases. There should have been a lot of cases like that, and the reality is it's not. It's, you don't have any stories, like that, and the Talmud would have brought down probably hundreds of cases, like that being the, and that was the, if that was the norm. But, the reality is for all us, the rest of us, all us humble people over here, it didn't exist. It only existed, at certain times, for a specific reason. Now, you mentioned about King Solomon, for instance. Now, you could say very simply that he married a lot of people. A lot of it was political also.
Sure.
All these different countries putting people together, and joining together. So, yeah, that's certainly, you can't look at that at at face value. Also, it says that his wives led him astray as well to serve idols. Right? So Talmud says, what do you mean? He really served idols? No, it's as if he did. But yeah, you have too many. The person has too many wives. We have hard enough time, just with one wife. And you see what the result is in the world. You speak about what's going on in the States and other places that, divorce rate is sky high. It's like, you change your spouse like you change your shirt. It's like, it's kind of like a 5-year option to renew. Maybe we'll stay together.
I want to drop that in on tonight's topic. Since we're discussing these topics with polygamy and adultery, I also want to put divorce in here too. That's definitely a touchy subject. Maybe not so controversial, but definitely people are curious about that. Real quickly, I'd like to shout out to John Lang. Says confused Christian listening for the first time. Welcome, John. Just to give you an idea of what the show, what this particular show is about, is just like the title: controversial issues. Rabbi Chaim Coffman is the only crazy one wild enough to jump on all these and with no fear.
No fear.
No fear.
Snack on death.
Yeah. And so the purpose of this particular show, which is typically every Wednesday night at 8 p.m., Hashem willing, will just be discussing controversial topics that most people don't like talking about. So that's where we're at. This is from an Orthodox Judaism view on what the Torah and the Tanakh teaches on these things. Also, shout out to Lorraine Ward. Hello. Dennis Habe Royal, shalom to you. Daniel of Idaho, good evening. That's pretty clever. Good evening, CC and TT. Chaim Coffman and Tanakh Talk. Very good. Spiritual Talmud, shalom to you as well. Okay, Rabbi, so we'll go ahead and move on forward. And the phone lines are open, 855-95-BIBLE, just so you can remember it. 855-952-4253. The lines are open. Feel free to call if you've got a controversial question or even a question about the topic that, like we're talking about, that we're actually on now. If you got something you want to spin off of it. Rabbi, I'm going to spin one back at you. We mentioned earlier about, in the beginning, man shall cleave himself to his wife. And the idea of man wanting multiple wives, the whole coveting part. The commandment is don't covet your neighbor's wife, right? So if you're coveting, but you're coveting a single lady, then really it's not a bad, I guess it's really not the same, right? So
Well, if she's single, that's different. If she's single, it's not permitted per se. It's less of a prohibition. Because that gets into the whole topic of what do you call it, of adultery. If you want to go there, I'll mention one thing quickly in the marriage ceremony. There are two things that go on in a marriage ceremony that today actually we do together. One is called erusin, which is literally we'll translate it as the betrothal, the engagement, and the second part is nisuin, which is actually the marriage itself. So today what goes on is the betrothal and the marriage ceremony are basically one and the same. They happen all at once. And in years ago, or many years ago, they, a person got engaged and then they didn't get married for like, for another year for a woman to, gather her dowry, etc. So those events took place over a longer period of time. But today it is, it's all done pretty much in one shot. So I will mention that there are 7 blessings that are made under the canopy when a person gets married. The first of them says that the rabbi will say is, "Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments, commanded us regarding forbidden unions, and he forbade betrothed women to us, permitted women who are married to us through canopy and consecration. Blessed are you, God sanctifies his people Israel through canopy and consecration."
Okay, so
that
just
means,
go ahead.
So that, yeah, go ahead.
So just as a blanket statement, will it be legitimate to say that halakhically now it's not permissible for Jewish men to marry multiple wives across the board?
Yes. Across the board.
Okay. What about for the Noahide, the non-Jew?
All right. So actually, just before we get to Noah, I just wanted to mention one thing. This blessing that's made, so it basically forbids, as we read, it only permits the one that you're standing with under the canopy. That means everybody else is forbidden.
So what if a Jew just said, you know what, I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to marry 5 women all up under the same canopy at the same time.
Yeah, they'll stone him. I mean, you can.
Yeah, I see
there
what you mean.
Things that maybe you can play around with. In this case, you're under the canopy. That's it. Once there are 2 witnesses there, and they see the man put the ring, on the woman's finger. He gives her the marriage document. If nothing else happens, there's a huge storm. Everyone runs inside. Whatever. That's it. According to that. Even if you don't make the blessings, he's still married, right? They're still considered married at that point. At that point, if something happened, he would have an obligation, seemingly, to give her a get, to give her a bill of divorce. Now, for a Noahide, now that you brought that up, for a Noahide, marriage, the way we look at marriage is totally different. Marriage is sort of like, it's like almost like caveman style, Caveman takes big club, bonks her on the head, takes her to the cave. That's it. According to, that medieval, get a little bit medieval here, that medieval way of looking at things, once somebody lives together, right, and they're, at least according to the Torah, we're not talking about secular courts or anything else. Once he takes her into his house, and they're living like husband and wife,
they're married.
That's considered marriage.
Right.
That's considered marriage. Now, if he decides I want out, or she wants out, and she says, it's been real, but see this caveman down the block, longer hair, bigger beard, that's it. You're toast. And she walks out, or he walks out, that's divorce. According to the Torah. Now, on the books in a lot of states, there's something called common law marriage. Right. This seemingly seems like this is what is common law marriage. About 20 years ago, there was a famous court case with the famous actor William Hurt that was living with somebody, and he ended up walking out. On his wife, and she wanted to claim half his money. What are you doing claiming half my money? So she said, "What do you mean common law marriage? We're living together as husband and wife." And, he fought it tooth and nail. And there's a difference of opinion, at least as far as I understand today as well. Not all states hold common law marriage. Mm-hmm. Now, according to the Torah, it would seem she's got a claim. You're not living together. He's not in a situation where, he looks at his wife, or he looks at, this woman like, for lack of a better word, like a prostitute. It's not what he's living. That's not what he's doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's living there like husband and wife, right? So that's what her intention is. His intention is, seemingly, even though he doesn't have a piece of paper. So there was a whole big court case with that, and I think she did, if I remember correctly, I think she did get something out of it, but she didn't get half his estate. So common law marriage seems this is what this is what the Torah says. This is exactly what the what the Torah says. So for a Noahide, if they want to go according to the state and they want to have that piece of paper, they certainly can. They don't have an obligation to do so. It might be practical in other ways, but they don't have an obligation to do so for the sole reason that according to the Torah they don't need it. They're living together. That's it. That's that is that is certainly that's certainly enough. Another thing that you brought up while we're on that topic, you speak about adultery. Now, adultery is something very specific. Adultery is somebody who is married, right? We're talking about a married man and a married woman. Even though a married man with a single woman, will throw the book at him, will say he's immoral and everything else, that is, it's still impermissible, but it's not considered adultery. So according to this,
like for example, the prostitute situation.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, you have the story, of course, in the Torah with Judah, and his intent. Of course, we know how that intent turned out. But the whole point of it never really. I don't remember anywhere where he was actually criticized, like rebuked for that action, even though the outcome actually had some issues, ramifications. But
right.
What's your opinion on that?
It is definitely strange the way it all came about. The fact that she was dressed up, as a as a prostitute, and he came to her, whatever. The end result was that he had 2 children, and that's where kingship comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Which is extremely strange. Like, if God wanted kingship really to come from him, so why don't you have a normal relationship? Why did he have to have it through his daughter-in-law? We know after the Torah is given that it's forbidden to be with your daughter-in-law.
Of course, it wasn't intended, of course.
No, but the question is, though, the question is, did he stay with her afterwards?
Right.
So there is a difference of opinion whether he did stay with her or, whether he didn't. The point, the bottom line is, this is the way God wanted it.
Yeah.
And this is where kingship comes from. So you say, well, if you really kept the Torah before it was given, which comes up quite a bit in the book of Genesis, that the matriarchs kept the Torah before it was given, whatever the Torah looked like. So you have to ask the question, how could he do such a thing? Forget how it happened, but why could he do it? It's you look at the same thing what happened with the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Miriam, Moshe's sister, tells her father that you made a worse decree than Pharaoh. Pharaoh said you're not allowed to be, you're not allowed any male child that's born, you kill him. He says, but you divorced mom. All the other men divorced their wives, so your decree is worse, right? So it seems that from that, what does he do? He gets remarried, and she gives birth to Moshe. The problem there is that if you go according to genealogy, that she is Amram's aunt.
Okay.
So how can he marry his aunt? And B, in the book of Numbers, one of the commentaries says that she actually got married after she got divorced from Amram. So now you have a major problem. The major problem is that how can you take her back? Because there's an explicit verse in the book of Deuteronomy that says that if a person's married, he gets divorced, and she gets married. Once she gets married, the husband's never allowed to be with the first husband's never allowed to be with her again.
Right.
So if you follow that logic, so what in the world's Miriam doing? She says, Mom, Dad, get back together. What do you mean get back together? Mm-hmm. She's forbidden to him.
Now is that just with the Kohanim?
No, it has nothing to do with the Kohanim.
That's for every Jew.
That is for every Jew.
Okay.
The Kohen, the high priest is only allowed to marry a virgin. Now, a regular priest, a regular Kohen. Now, this will get into the topic of mamzer, of a bastard child. See, we're hitting a lot of topics all at once here. Boom, that's it them all. So, a Kohen today, for practical purposes, a Kohen is not allowed to be married to someone who is called a zona. That means a zona, we translate it as a prostitute. It means a woman who's been with someone she's not allowed to be with. Right? She's been defiled by someone she's not allowed to be with. So if that's the case, He's not allowed to marry. He can't marry her or a divorcee.
I thought it was that he couldn't marry. He had to marry specifically virgin. You could not marry.
That's the high priest.
Oh, okay, okay.
That is the high priest.
Okay.
Right? A regular Kohen, if she had been with somebody, let's say she was, at one time she was with a non-Jew, let's say. So that union, even if they have no kids, that union doesn't necessarily make her forbidden, right? Wouldn't necessarily make her forbidden, to marry a Kohen. Everyone's got this idea, like, yeah, I only want to marry a Kohen, right? It's
sure.
It's complicated. If a woman, if a woman's been with someone, let's say, and she tells this guy, I've been with someone, and he believes her, right? This is another important point. If he believes her, then that's it. She's forbidden to him.
Okay, let's jump the track real fast. New Testament says that if a man divorces his woman, he causes her to be an adulterer. Meaning, if he's not going to go back to her, that she's going to have to marry someone else. Then, there's a big discussion in the New Testament about marriage and what it's like in heaven. Jesus is talking about how the angels aren't married or given in marriage, and there's a whole mass of flux of confusion there. And is there anything in Judaism that deals with those points that they're trying to bring forward in the New Testament?
I mean, if someone gets divorced,
woman, specifically a woman.
Yeah, that the Talmud sheds the God Himself. Talmud says sheds tears on it, but divorce is allowed.
Right.
If there's no reconciliation or there can't be any reconciliation, we're not interested that there should be so much divorce, but divorce definitely exists. And if a person gets divorced, then the husband has to give his wife a bill of divorce. If he doesn't, she can't get remarried. And sometimes the husband can use extortion or extortionary measures, get money or other things from his wife in order to give her a bill of divorce, which also is controversial because so a woman like that is called a chained woman. She's called an aguna. She can't remarry unless he gives a bill of divorce. So people say, so change the system. It's a terrible system. A recalcitrant husband can ruin his wife and not allow her to get married. So they say, great, so force him. Beat him to an inch of his life. Hang him on over a cliff. And say, Shloimi, you want to give that divorce? You really want to give that divorce? Like, yeah, I'll do it. Well, you're not allowed to do that because he's given what they call a forced bill of divorce. But according to the Rambam says you're allowed to do such a thing. Why? Because he really wants to do the right thing. It's just his evil inclination is taking him away from it. Right? His evil inclination is telling him, nah, don't do it. Don't allow her to get married. Mess up your kids. Mess up your wife. Do whatever you want. So then people will say, okay, let's have a prenuptial agreement. That if, God forbid, anything goes wrong, you agree to give me a bill of divorce. Now, in the ultra-Orthodox world today, prenuptial agreement has no, it has no strength. Doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't get married on condition. Right? In the modern Orthodox world, it's more of a, I guess it's more of a normal thing, but, in the ultra-Orthodox world, it doesn't really work. So the obvious question would be, so change the system.
Mm-hmm.
Let a woman start the proceeding. Why does she have to wait for her husband? And then her husband's going to take all kinds of money and chain her, and she'll be chained. She can't get divorced. So the Talmud says, why does the husband have to give her something? Why does he make, quote unquote, an acquisition under the canopy? He has to give her something, right? He has to give her, we give her a ring, right? You have to give something of value that she's going to accept. Now, it's not an acquisition like we normally say, as an acquisition per se. The idea is he has to give something. Why? Because, who is it more difficult for a person to make a commitment? Is it a man or a woman? Well, obviously it's a man, because the Talmud says a woman would rather be married than not be married.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She'd rather have security, some level of security. A guy, he's going to play the field. He's
Mm-hmm.
going to have a great time. I want to commit to something with a piece of paper. Like I heard a great rabbi once say, a person lives together, with the woman. He says, how you destroy a great romance? He says, get married. So that's it. How many people,
That's funny.
if you check, how many people live together, they live together for years, and then they get married. How often does that lead in divorce? It's like skyrocket. If the average divorce rate now is over 50%, it's probably over 60% now. But if you look at someone who lives together, then that goes up to like 70% or 75%. So what changed? You're living together, everything's fine. All of a sudden, you get that piece of paper, it's like, guy starts to sweat.
Mm-hmm.
He breaks out in hives. He's like, she's going to get half my money. Like, it changes, changes relationship. But the reality is that he has to make the commitment. She's ready to make the commitment. That's obvious. He doesn't want to make the commitment. But once he makes the commitment, he's going to be the one to break it.
Interesting.
Again,
so what do you say to the woman out there now, whether she's a Jew or whether she's not, who's in an abusive relationship and it's not going well? There's no sign of relief, and she wants out, but the husband won't sign a divorce papers. What would she do?
Well, she's stuck. I mean, technically speaking, certainly she can get a bill of divorce from the courts, keep him out and all that. Getting a bill of divorce, that's a problem. That is, there are people out there are organizations that certainly try and help out with such a thing, but the system can be abused.
Right.
There is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is no good, solution, and there are men out there that will hold their wives, hostage for, any number of things, either visitation rights, money,
mm-hmm.
Whatever. It's totally wrong. And you're not allowed to do it. They do have, at least in New York, they have this bill of divorce law, what they call this get law, that, can freeze a husband's bank account, can, do other things. But, many rabbinical authorities hold it's a little bit problematic. I mean, more than problematic, because it basically forces him to do certain things. And because you force him to do certain things, why isn't that called a forced bill of divorce? A forced bill of divorce is forbidden. So it's a very touchy situation. So in this case, you say, what can a person do? You do whatever you can, to get out of the situation, obviously within reason. But, can the system be abused? Yeah, the system can be abused. It's tragic. There's no, there's no question. How do you get out of it? That's, it's a hard thing to answer.
Right. And what do you have to do with when it comes to like spiritual battles between husband and wife? They can't come to agreement. One is binding him or herself to the New Testament. The other one is binding him or herself to the Hebrew Scriptures. And there's just constant battle. Is there permission there for a separation, or do they have to stay together until? What's the rule there?
So the question like that, I would always tell people, like, someone, if you're talking about two non-Jews, we'll make it easy. You got two non-Jews. One wants to go in this path, of Torah, either be a Noahide or convert, but the non-Jews aren't willing to move. So on the one side, you have one or two choices, right? That spouse has one or two choices. Either they'll stay in Noahide, and they'll do whatever they can to, bring up their kids like that. I mean, obviously there's going to be conflict, or they have to get divorced. Now, I would never tell anybody, in such a situation, you automatically have to get divorced.
Right.
If that's the only issue, if that's the only issue that's going on, everything else, we'll call it even. If everything else is going okay, then I would, it'd be a hard thing. It would be a hard thing for me to say to, tell someone to get divorced. I would never tell someone, to do that. But that is a real problem. When one spouse goes in one direction, another spouse goes in a different direction, that is a real, that's a real problem. And someone, let's say, got divorced. That's what I thought you were getting to.
It was.
Yeah, okay, so good. I can actually read your mind through your. Anyway, if there's, we'll get the button. Anyway, if someone does get divorced, and let's say one spouse actually converts, and the other spouse, doesn't, and the kids want to convert, so that's a major issue. That is rabbinical court have to decide what to do, because if the children are going back and forth, even if the mother has custody, let's say we'll make it easy, trying to make things easy here. If the woman has custody, the mother has custody, then then, if the husband does whatever he can to poison his kids, that's also a problem. The rabbinical court's not going to say, okay, the mother's got custody, that's fine. They're going to have to see exactly what the situation is, what goes on before they're going to allow the kids to convert. That can work the same way also for two Jews that, God forbid, end up getting divorced, and, one spouse is more religious than the other. And the one spouse tries to poison the kids against the other spouse. And, normally in divorce, across the board, when a person gets divorced, if it happens, everybody suffers. The kids suffer. I'm not saying the person should stay in a bad marriage, right? They're if it doesn't work out, then, you've gone for help and things aren't going to change, or a person in an abusive relationship, God forbid. Yeah, there's a mitzvah to get divorced. That there's nothing to talk about. But even if you have to get divorced, you want to try and make it in a way that the kids don't suffer as much, but the kids get killed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, that's the nature of the beast. That's what often, that's what often happens, and they're in the crossfire. And anyone will tell you, therapists and, psychiatrists or whatever, don't put your kids in the line of battle.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they do. That's what often happens, and the kids get messed up in the process. It's not their fault, but they're put in the crossfire. So imagine, by one parent, by the mother, let's say, the kid grows up to be, goes to a Jewish school, an Orthodox school, wants to hold by these ideals, and the father causes all kinds of problems, or vice versa. You can have it either way. We're not going to pick on men here. We'll pick on women also. We're try and pick on everybody here, but you could have either way, and that is a recipe for disaster. And if that child or those children don't get help, they're going to be messed up later in life, no question.
Okay, let me throw this up here. John Lang is the gentleman who has said a confused Christian watching what was going on, a little confused about what was going on. He just made a comment. I hope you don't mind me. He put it up publicly, so I guess he doesn't mind. He says, "I'm glad the rabbi addressed going in different directions, the possibilities thereof. I'm considering becoming a Noahide, and my wife is a staunch Lutheran Christian." And so in his situation, without knowing any details, just right off the top of my head, I'm thinking, going back on what you said a few moments ago, would be, if you don't need the divorce and it's not really something that's critically to happen, don't seek for divorce. Try to work it out, especially if there's kids involved. If there's no kids involved and there's just no sign of hope, then am I right in saying that if the person feels more comfortable, parting ways, that they're permitted to do so, especially as a Noahide?
Right. Again, if there are other factors going on, so sure, then you can't get help. There is nothing to be done. So yeah, you get divorced. One thing, in this situation that gets complicated, let's say this guy says, wants to be a Noahide. Now, one of the Noahide laws is idolatry, right? You can't go bowing down to anyone on a stick, or a short little fat guy, or who knows what, or totem poles, or whatever the case is, or but that's one of the 7 Noahide laws. So children also have to be educated in these laws as well. If you get conflict between husband and wife, she wants to take the kids to church, let's say for argument's sake that Christianity is idolatry, which most rabbinical authorities agree. Mm-hmm. So, and this guy is jumping up and down and going out of his skin because one of the 7 Noahide laws doesn't want his kids to get brainwashed. But at the end of the day, whatever person does in this process, and I tell people who want to convert, that if their kids come along, that's fine. If they don't come along, that's something you got to deal with. That's something that it's not gonna be like Little House on the Prairie. Not everything, come on, John boy, sit boo boo, it's not going to work out exactly the way that we want it to work out. So if someone understands that, going in, so okay. So if you can do your best to try and educate, your children, if they decide they still want to be pagan and they want to go in that direction, okay, they're going to pay a price, but, what can you do? It's out of your hands. And if you decide to convert and your kids don't want to convert, similar thing, that makes things more, problematic, because you have older kids living in your house. There will be rabbinical courts that won't want to convert, the parents or whatever until kids are out of the house. Because,
right.
Until they're older, because the kids are doing all kinds of things, and it's certainly, you're getting mixed messages all over the place. So you certainly want that.
And it's hard to get no way to keep a kosher kitchen and all these other things too when you have the violators in the house.
Extremely complicated. It's an extremely complicated situation. In most cases, I would say that I deal with that's usually not such an issue. I've dealt with some cases that it is, that it is an issue, but most cases, usually if the kids are younger, so the kids go along. But at the end of the day, once they convert, if they're underage, so at the age of 12 or 13, so the Beis Din's going to ask them, the rabbinical court will say, okay, do you want to be a Jew or not? They give them the choice because they're converted against their will, because they're younger. But converting against their will is okay because, we hold that it's a big merit for them, as long as they're going to be educated in the Torah way. So we don't see it as a problem, but the parents have to live the lifestyle. They have to, they have to walk the walk and talk the talk and do what they need to do to be proper Jews. But at the end of the day, at that age, they're going to get asked, do you want to do this or not? There's a famous story. There was one of the top students in the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak here in Israel found out that something happened, the grandmother or whatever, that had either there was an issue, whatever, with his, with the status of being a Jew, and he needed to convert. So Rabbi sat down with him, explained to him, the situation, and he was like one of the top students, in the yeshiva. So they said, you can think about it. You have a choice. He'd been religious like his whole life. So he said, you have a choice of what you want to do. And he thought about it, and he said, this has been great. I'm out of here. And he left. He absolutely left. So, that certainly can, that certainly can happen. I wouldn't necessarily say it's
sure.
It's the norm, but you have to be given that choice, because if you didn't accept the Torah as an adult, then as an adult you have to accept it, and a person can go either way. Most likely, if child has been brought up that way, from a young age, they're going to keep going in that, in that path. But you never know. You have that, you have that choice.
Okay, John Ling says his kids are grown and he loves his wife very much. So my recommendation is hang in there, man. Just stay with her and just love her, man. Love her and enjoy your life with her, and just be tolerant, as much as you can, and just maintain a good relationship. She might come.
Speak about everything except religion.
Be a light to her. You never know how that's going to play out. Hey, shout out to Michelle. Michelle, hi, how are you? And then also Michael Faircloth. Good to see all the viewers out there. Okay, Rabbi. Yeah, so what's really cool about talking about this, I didn't really think the divorce thing was going to basically take over the show, but actually I'm kind of glad it did, because in Christianity...
No one's going to take over the show. I'm going to be careful what I say now. Wait a minute, what about this? No,
well, in Christianity, it's like they paint the picture really that divorce is like forbidden, period. You should never get divorced. And I've actually heard pastors coach wives who were being physically abused. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to stay with them and love on them and try to win them back.
That's insanity. That Judaism doesn't look so highly on divorce. You do whatever you can to stay married. If it doesn't work, though, it doesn't work. There is a system set up, certainly to get divorced, but I'm always fond of saying, and we'll get this put on the bumper stickers or on the buttons, the 614th commandment, that is, don't be stupid. Or the 615th commandment, don't be a moron. Like, if a person's being abused, you say, what are we, all English? We're going to say, oh, sir, can I have another whap? Can I have another whap? Like, come on.
That's funny.
There's no mitzvah to be abused. And you have to stay with it. And there are other issues. You might have kids, or whatever the case is, that you may want to stay together for a certain amount of time, but if someone's in a really bad situation, then there is no mitzvah to stay together. Some people can get stuck as well. What happens if a woman has no way to make money, and this person just abusing her and doing other things, and she's sort of stuck. She can't leave. Like, where's she gonna go? And I know some cases like that also. That's tragic. That's absolutely tragic. There's no mitzvah to stay together. There's no question. But then you say, well, what am I going to do? I have no way to support myself, and I have nowhere to go, so to speak. That's I don't have an answer for that either. But but there's no, Judaism definitely says that there's an issue, you got to deal with it.
Right.
And if someone's in a bad situation, the person refuses to go for help, and there's no way to deal with it, possibly, then you're not left with very much of a choice. If, let's say there's psychological issues. That's let's say a person has certain psychological issues. They're not willing to work on them, and they're not willing, if they are workable, let's say, and he refuses to go for help, then a woman has to make a decision. What she can handle, what she can't handle, and if it's an impossible thing to handle, then you got to pack your bags, cut your losses, and get plenty of help to deal with it. But we're not looking. Judaism for sure is not looking to chain people. We're not looking to to abuse people, even though the system can get misused. That that is true, but it's the only system we have. So if a person's in a situation, there's no mitzvah to get beaten up by it. If it doesn't work, and there's no way out of it, then you're not left with much of a choice. You do whatever you can to try and save it. If it can't be saved, it can't be saved. That's
Okay, now I think we discussed this next thing last week, but I can't remember because I've got shows with a bunch of different people, and I can't remember who discussed it. But it got brought up again. What is the halakha rules for sex outside of marriage? Husband's not married; he's a single man, and he's dating a girl who's single. They've never been married, neither one of them. Can they have sex?
No.
No.
I mean, it's may not be a Torah prohibition if they're both single. Right. If it's the problem, again, we mentioned by adultery, is the fact that they're both married. If they're not married, let's say, or a married man and a single girl, let's say that that's still not permitted, right? It's
right.
Definitely still not permitted. It's not necessarily called adulterous, right? But it's not it's not permitted now. At least. In the Jewish way of thinking, because that's what we're speaking about here, any of these things, outside of marriage is going to be problematic. The famous movie, in the mid 80s when Harry met Sally, right? Yep. When everything, you can never be friends with the other side. You just, one thing leads to another, and, things get ruined. I mean, they've done studies, of boys and girls who go to school together and are separate, and, the studies show that when they're separate, then scores go up, and and other things. So, as we mentioned, by the first of the blessings of the 7 blessings by marriage, that's read under the canopy, that they're both forbidden to each other, not allowed to be with anyone else. They say, okay, so we're not talking about marriage, right? But there's a moral issue. There's a moral issue here, and the moral issue is that physicality always gets in the way. That's just, I don't think I'm saying anything radical here, even though this is controversial issues. That's not so controversial. Mm-hmm. When you have 2 people together, hormones going crazy, yeah. So it can be based on a physical, it can be based on a physical thing. But there's a difference. There's a difference between love and infatuation. Right? Infatuation is something like you have this ideal, or you have this idea what you think it is, or whatever, but what is it based on? It's not based on reality. It could be based on, the way a person looks. That's why, according to, Judaism, a husband's not allowed to be with his wife anytime he wants, right? During her cycle, he has to separate. So therefore, he has to treat his wife like a person, not like an object.
Right. That's awesome.
So if there's physicality that goes on, well before that, there's always going to be a question, at least probably by a woman, not necessarily by a guy, because, what does he care? Mm-hmm. That she's going to think, is he interested in me for me, or is he interested in me just, for my body? And that within Judaism has, there's a lot to say about that because, during that time, person can't be together. So you have to have something more than a physical relationship. Because what happens down the line where, you get older, more wrinkles, this, that. I mean, there's only so much plastic surgery you can do, right? So, like, you got women that want to, still look good for their husbands. Otherwise, the husband's going to go astray. But within Judaism, that shouldn't be, I guess, in the ideal sense. That shouldn't be because, there has to be more to the relationship than just the physical. That's why it's, a marriage is considered like it's like a flower. It's like a plant. If you don't water the plant, it dies. Yeah, it's something that has to be, it's something that has to be worked on, to the extent that, you got to spend quality time. It can't just be, during that time you're allowed to be physical because, otherwise that relationship's never going to last. You just got to, eventually it's just going to fizzle. So anytime you have a relationship based on that, just look at Hollywood.
Okay,
right?
So zooming out, way out, absolutely forbidden or maybe acceptable?
No, it's forbidden.
Absolutely forbidden. Sex outside of marriage for a non-Jew is just as forbidden as it is for a Jew.
No, for a non-Jew, it might not be forbidden.
Oh, that's the specific question. That is the question.
Okay, so for a Jew, yeah, it's forbidden. For a non-Jew, it may not be forbidden.
Meaning you have certain circumstances that could go either way. Is that kind of?
Again, let's make clear. For a Jew, it may not be necessarily a Torah prohibition, certainly a rabbinic prohibition, right? For a non-Jew, it may not even be a rabbinic prohibition, but for a non-Jew, the idea may be that it still may be immoral, to do such a thing. You're going to tell me, is it forbidden? No, it's not. For a non-Jew, it wouldn't be forbidden. The question would be, though, is it something beneficial for them to do? Okay. Very good. It's a moral issue.
Yeah.
It's definitely a moral issue. If you would ask most non-Jews, about it, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Probably most women would say, that, it's probably a bad thing. But even though they'll get involved in it, whatever, but, if they, they feel they have to get involved in it because otherwise, a person's not going to be attracted to them or whatever. So they do have that issue, but it certainly is a moral issue there is. That there's no question. And today, certainly you can see, that in, it's tragic. Like in, public schools, they have, they give out condoms and everything else. Like, these kids should never be, never be doing such a thing, at such a young age. But there's a reality, right? There's an absolute reality of what goes on. We're not living in Victorian England anymore, but, there is that. There is that reality. So yeah, it may not be forbidden, but the question is it a, is it a moral, is it a moral, right. Is it a moral issue? Gotcha. And for Noahide, it should be a moral issue, but
I think so too.
It may not be much more than that.
Right. Gotcha. It's kind of like, pork. I mean, it's scientifically proven that pork, undercooked or not undercooked, is bad for you, but it's obviously permissible for a non-Jew to eat pork, but it's not permissible for a Jew. So interesting. Okay. Well, we've got time for one more question, topic, something. If I don't get a phone call like in the next 30 seconds, then I'm going to run on to plugging Rabbi Coffman in his Beyond Orthodox conversion to Judaism. One thing I really found interesting about Rabbi Coffman is he's willing to train people, even though you may not be in a position to convert right now. If you know you're going to be in that position and you're just trying to prep yourself, you need to call Rabbi. He's got some really great classes available. He's doing a lot of things on Facebook, and he actually works with conversions under certain circumstances. And if you're just curious and you have questions, definitely contact him on Facebook. Hey, how'd you get my coffee cup all the way in Israel? That looks just like my coffee cup.
You want to see it?
Yeah, dude, that's like the same cup I've got. So
no coffee. Trust me, I'd be like jumping off the bandwagon to his coffee. It's only tea, so a little bit of caffeine.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, cool, man. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a lot of fun. It's been, again, I'll tell everybody each week, send us your what you think a hot topic would be for us to be that would be controversial. If you've got just random questions, you're probably going to want to save those for Rabbi Singer on Let's Get Biblical Q&A, 11 a.m. Central. Or even TNT Tuesday nights, however that works out, depends on what your question is. And we're going to really try to focus on keeping this controversial stuff. So I don't know what next week's title is going to be yet, but you'll see it. Subscribe to the Facebook events page on Tanakh Talk. And so every time I create an actual event, if you're subscribed to the events, you'll actually get a little red balloon that tells you Tanakh Talk just created a new event, and then it'll let you know.
Come on, get him a button. Get him a button.
That's an easy button. Oh man, I tell you what, Rabbi, it's been a good one. Thank you for your time, for sure, and really appreciate your willingness to do this. It's one of those areas not too many people would want to go. So shalom. Yeah, shalom everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. Next lineup of shows for Tanakh Talk will be this coming Sunday morning, Isaiah at 9 a.m. Central. Shalom, shalom to you, my dear Rabbi, and we will talk to you and everyone else on the other side. Shalom, shalom.
Awesome, shalom.
Shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי